I want you to change the world, and don't think that this is going to happen peacefully or you can do it alone. We need to kill the rich. You get out there, you use your weapons, and you rip Washington apart. You hunt down the billionaires, the bank bosses, the CEOs, the scumbags and the liars, the governors, the lobbyists, the senators, because they're all the same, and you hang them.
Good morning, everyone. It's February 5th, 2020. America. Today, we're going to look at the geopolitics of bioweapons and our government versus the Chinese government. How much different are they really? And what should we expect when the outbreak is obvious to everyone? You might notice that I'm going to be speaking a little bit slowly today, and this is because for some reason I've been getting tongue-tied, and I don't know why. So I'm going to speak a little more slowly and deliberately so that doesn't happen. Alright. I have found many good videos on media, and one of these media people zooming in with Simone Gao or Gao, not really sure. And in this particular video, there is an interview with a doctor, a couple of them. And we're going to check out a couple of the clips from this interview and dive into the articles that are open in my tabs. Let's do a little bit of update here before we get started on that end. Cruise ship coronavirus cases spike 30%. Death recorded in Europe. The key word being recorded. All right. Toll of infected passengers and crew aboard the Diamond Princess climbs to 285. The U.S. arranges a charter plane for Americans aboard the ship. First fatality in Europe as Chinese tourists died in France. China has sent 217 medical rescue groups totaling 25,630 personnel to Hubei province to fight the outbreak. I'm going to tell you wrong. It's way, way too late to fight this outbreak. And of course, some would claim that I'm spreading misinformation. But if you look at the timeline of all this, it's the only logical conclusion one can come to. Hubei health officials report 420 new cases and 139 new deaths for February 14th. NHC officials report an additional 4 deaths and 2,641 cases. China warns of incoming case surge. That's because they're going to have to actually give some decent numbers to make up for the news that's been coming out of China, to account for the crematorium activity. WHO demands to know more about sick doctors and insists group of 12 virus experts will reach Beijing over the weekend. And they do not want anyone from the United States in their country. At least not in official capacity, meaning viral experts or any of that. CDC people. Singapore reports largest daily jump in cases amid increased human-to-human transmission. They also report new cases. Egypt confirms first case, virus now present in 29 countries or territories. Hong Kong reports 3 new cases. New quarantine measures take effect in Wuhan. Hong Kong Disneyland offers space for quarantine. Not a good idea. Chinese company says blood plasma of recovered patients useful in combating the virus. The U.S. is mulling new travel restrictions. Japan reports 4 new cases. 1 patient recently returned from Hawaii. I'll say that again. 1 patient recently returned from Hawaii. Many people from the mainland here travel to Hawaii. I would say a significant amount. CDC director, virus is coming to the U.S. And finally, 5 presumptive cases reported in British Columbia. So, let's move on to this one. This is authored by Alvin Powell via the Harvard Gazette. And of course, it is on Zero Hedge. Harvard expert warns coronavirus likely just now gathering steam. Yep, just now gathering steam. It's just getting started, in other words. The number of confirmed cases of the Wuhan coronavirus has continued to surge inside China, sickening tens of thousands, with a death toll of more than 1,000. But outside the Asian giant, the numbers remain a fraction of that. A trend Harvard's Mark Lipsitch views with suspicion. In other words, he's a conspiracy theorist like myself. It must be a conspiracy theory. But I bet this dude is a lot more qualified to comment on these things than I am, which is why I go and look for material by people who are more qualified to make these claims than I am, simply to back up my view. He thinks that it's just a matter of time before the virus spreads widely internationally, which means nations so far only lightly hit should prepare for its eventual arrival in force and what may seem like the worst flu season in modern times. And I'm not going to read the whole whole thing here because it's an interview. I will say this, bold here. This is really a global problem that's not going to go away in a week or two. And I've been saying that. This is not going away. And our government will grant itself sweeping new powers to handle the virus. And if you believe that's the case, we're going to get to my main one here. The Geopolitics of Biological Weapons, Part 1. A useful and timely factual overview. After this, we're going to get to the clips from the foreign news. And probably do a second part to this video because this is part 1 of this article, and it is very telling. Now, you really want to take a look at your nation's morality. You have to ask yourself, who did they bring back after World War II? What did they do with these people? I find it to be very, very ironic that in our country, in some states, you have to sign some kind of support for Israel document to even speak in that state. I find it very ironic that our nation has its tongue in Israel's ass so deeply when, after World War II, we went and captured and changed the identities to some of these Nazi scientists who did horrific things. But I digress. The U.S. government and its many agencies and educational and health institutions have for many decades conducted intensive research into biological warfare, in many cases strongly focused on race-specific pathogens. Race-specific pathogens. In a report to the U.S. Congress, the Department of Defense revealed that its program of creating artificial biological agents included modifying non-fatal viruses to make them lethal, and genetic engineering to alter the immunology of biological agents to make treatment and vaccinations impossible. To make treatment and vaccinations impossible. The military report admitted that at the time it operated about 130 bioweapons research facilities, dozens at U.S. universities and others at many international sites outside the purview of the U.S. Congress and the jurisdiction of the courts. See how that works? That's why we have so many vassal nations, so that our people can do unspeakable things outside our country and face no prosecution. This knowledge hasn't been a secret for a long time. In a classified 1948 report by the Pentagon's Committee on Biological Warfare, the main selling point was that, in quotes, a gun or a bomb leaves no doubt that a deliberate attack has occurred. But if an epidemic slashes across a crowded city, there's no way of knowing whether anyone attacked, much less who. Adding, hopefully, that a significant portion of the human population within selected target areas may be killed or incapacitated with only very small amounts of a pathogen. Again, this is your government saying this. This is your government doing things like this. And you vote for a lot of these people. Yeah, this is people like that Dan Crenshaw guy. This is people like what was that fucker? What's his name? The one that died. Oh man, I can't believe that slipped my mind. It was right there too. Anyway, people continuously vote for these criminals. Let's see here. A U.S. Army operating manual from 1956 stated explicitly that biological and chemical warfare were an integral operating portion of U.S. military strategy, were not restricted in any way, and that Congress had given the military first strike authority on their use. In 1959, an attempt by Congress to remove this first strike authority was defeated by the White House, and biochemical weapons expenditure increased from $75 million to almost $350 million. That was an enormous amount of money in the 60s, by the way. U.S. Defense Secretary Robert McNamara executed 150 top-secret bioweapons programs in the 1960s, performing bioweapons experiments and field tests on an unwitting public, sometimes in foreign countries, but most often against American citizens. He ordered the Joint Chiefs of Staff to consider all possible applications of these agents against enemy nations in a coherent plan for total biological and chemical deterrent capability. In the year 2000, The Project for the New American Century produced a report titled Rebuilding America's Defenses. You remember that? Which contained a radical and belligerent right-wing policy ambition for America. The report called itself a blueprint for maintaining global U.S. preeminence and shaping the international security order in line with American principles and interests. And, one of the things that's in line with these principles and interests is producing nasty chemical and biological weapons to use on the world's public. Bioweapons research institutions. You're going to say, damn, Eric, you're covering all this word for word. The whole thing is important, people. I mean, this has information in it that you need to know, that everybody should know. So please do bear with me, okay? Stay till the end, because this is important. I know, in these times it's very difficult to have a decent attention span, but really, you really want to know about this. The U.S. Army's Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases at Fort Detrick, Maryland, is the Army's military's main facility for research on biological warfare. By the mid-1980s, this bioweapons section of Fort Detrick was receiving nearly $100 million per year, and this was only one of many sections. When Japan invaded China, one of Dr. Aishi's Unit 731 grand successes was to develop methods of mass-producing fleas and ticks infected with the plague and other lethal pathogens for distribution among civilian populations, which is how the Americans learned to weaponize insects, to breed and disseminate ticks infested with Lyme's disease from their secret Plum Island germ laboratory in New York State. This was also the source of the U.S. programs of breeding and disseminating mosquitoes and fleas infected with cholera, yellow fever in China and North Korea, to say nothing of the domestic mosquito programs the U.S. inflicted on its own people. Now, can you tell me with a straight face that your government, your own military, your own police forces are truly your enemies? Founded on Ishi's human research, the military developed insect warfare facility and initially prepared plans to attack Russia and the Soviet states with these bioweapons. The facility was designed to produce 100 million yellow fever infected mosquitoes per month its output tested on unwitting American civilians by dropping infected mosquitoes and other insects over large portions of the U.S. As is so typical for the U.S. military, these projects beginning in the 1950s and 60s were given juvenile appellation like Project Big Buzz and Project Big Itch and Operation Mayday, but were tests of the feasibility of producing billions of insects, infecting them with lethal pathogens, then loading them into munitions and dispersing them over Russia from aircraft or even missiles. And again, before they do all that, they test these things on the American public. From a Army report, U.S. Army report from March of 1981, one writer noted that, in quotes, "You can marvel at how much or how little it would have cost to launch a yellow fever infected mosquito attack on a city, with a handy cost per death chart included. The Dugway sheep incident is worth attention as well." Then we had Operation Dropkick, designed to test various ways of dispensing infected insects over large geographical areas. Well, I think they have that problem solved, don't you? I mean, they disperse other chemicals via chemtrailing, or, I'm sorry, what's the latest fad term for it? Geoengineering. Aerosol injection. Whatever it is. There's their dispersal method right there. Recall, once again, I bring this up, the test performed on residue falling from the plains, I believe it was in California, maybe Colorado, maybe. It's been a while. But at any rate, among other things, they found dried red blood cells. And again, that would be an ideal host for a pathogen. Okay, let me get back here. The tests carried out over various parts of the continental U.S., including most of the East Coast. We had Project SHAD, Shipboard Hazard and Defense. Then, as late as 2000, we had Project Bacchus, designed to determine the feasibility of constructing an anthrax production facility in a foreign country while remaining undetected. There were other of these programs, of course, all with foolish names, and all designed to assess the dissemination of infected insects and other lethal pathogens into civilian populations. And they were illegal in domestic law and kept secret. In addition to Fort Detrick, U.S. military has a bioweapons ordnance plant in Vigo, Indiana, which was a massive production facility that specialized in biological pathogens and capable of producing 275,000 bombs containing botulism or 1 million anthrax bombs per month. So, why do we have these things? Now, you have to wonder, since our government is doing this to us, makes you wonder what other governments have been doing to us as well. When a nation's military is producing lethal biological pathogens in quantities of millions of liters, it is time to stop pretending we are not engaged in biological warfare. And the thing that really gets me about all this is we have the nerve to go around the world and tell other countries what they may or may not possess. But I will leave a link to this article below so that we can go ahead and move on. It cannot be overstated that these things are being used on us. Advanced forms of biological warfare that can target specific genotypes may transform biological warfare to a politically useful tool. And they do have a genocidal mentality. I think probably this current pathogen is a result of one of these laboratories. Tell me what you think. Am I wrong? Am I full of shit? I've been saying this from day one. Alright, let's move on to these clips. The difference between our government, our press, and the Chinese press. Check it out. The one I'm listening to is they have pretty good news about all kinds of different stuff, which is why I watch foreign other news channels, because you can't get anything but domestic propaganda on our news networks.
They should tell moving stories of how people on the front line are fighting the virus to showcase the unity of the Chinese people. China's state-run news media started extensive campaigns immediately after his remarks. On February 4th, Hunan Television, one of China's most popular cable TV channels, aired a 2-hour live broadcast with updates on the coronavirus epidemic. Spanned across 30 segments, the reports all take the same tone. We gave you a condensed version of what essentially that narrative is. China's National Health Commission released the latest update on the coronavirus. The number of recovered patients rose to 262. 4,955 patients were recently discharged from medical observation. No new reported deaths. Thanks to scientifically effective treatment, 3 patients have recovered. Laudi's second medical zone was constructed in only 3 weeks. My confidence in the victory has surpassed my worries. Hunan pharmaceutical manufacturers resume work to guarantee speedy and steady supply. Xiangdi Technology rushes back to work. Produce 20 automated nucleic acid
Alright, so I want to point out that when they opened on Monday, they had a worker at a 200-person facility come up positive for this virus, which ended in the entire workforce having to be quarantined. So that didn't work out too well. It didn't work out too well at all.
construction instruments made. Changsha Province, vegetable supply is more than enough. 8,000 tons of transactions per day. Despite high demand due to the virus outbreak, market prices remain relatively stable. Governor Du Jiahao visited railway stations to review their work. As long as we follow President Xi's lead and guidance from the central government, victory will be ours. V201 Hospital.
Now, does that sound too much different than what people say about Donald Trump? If we follow his lead, America will be great again. If we do this or that, does that sound much different, really? Let's see here. Let's jump to the doctor. Yeah, there it is.
In good deeds under the guidance of the party. Western audiences might find it ridiculous, but sadly, this has become a social norm in China whenever the government tries to deal with a public crisis. But is the propaganda effective? I asked the microbiologist and China expert Dr. Lin Xiaoxu. Do you think the Chinese government has been very effective in shaping public opinion?
I think actually the public opinion was heavily influenced, shaped by the Chinese propaganda tactic, because to the Chinese government, it's very clear, even from Xi Jinping's directive, it's very clear the government put propaganda purpose about rescuing people, and Chinese government control all the media resources. So when people being quarantined down at home or in the hospitals, if all they watch just the government's official tune, or the so-called positive energy, then more people will become delusional.
Coming up, the media tells a completely different story of Wuhan. The real death toll might be 8 to 10 times higher than the official number. While we do not attempt to undermine any efforts of the medical working on the front line, it is worth questioning what Chinese state-run media do not address and why. In fact, in contrast to China's official media, social media outside China that Chinese people have to circumvent the firewall to use depicts a very different picture. We selected the most credible ones with clear visuals that are self-explanatory. The Huoshenshan Hospital is one of 2 massive hospitals China has built to treat confirmed coronavirus patients with severe symptoms. According to China's official media, it is well and patient-friendly. But the construction workers' video reveals a different story, one that CCTV footage doesn't show. Each room has a tiny window for food delivery. Iron railings are installed on all windows. Doors can only be opened from the outside. People in the rooms cannot leave. The cameraman proclaimed, "This is not a hospital. It is a concentration camp." Fangcang hospitals are the massive quarantine centers in Wuhan. Patients there show grievous footage of the center. The the Wuhan government released a notice about quarantining 4 types of people, which are people to have coronavirus, those suspected to have the virus, people with fevers who cannot be ruled out for having the virus, and those who have had close contact with people with cases. The way and the extent the Chinese authorities enforce the quarantine measures are appalling.
Now, can any of you tell me with a straight face that our government wouldn't do the exact same thing that the Chinese government is doing? Dragging people from their homes, and so on and so forth.
Some communities, local officials ordered the lockdown of infected homes. That is, to seal their doors and windows so they can't get out. Another type of video circulating on social media is footage of dead bodies in hospitals and dead bodies being taken away. The underlying question is, if we see death everywhere, does that mean the death toll might be much higher than we know?
一个上午了，有的人已经是凌晨死的，到现在没有人来处理。然后医生、护士还有病人全部都在这种环境下面工作。这就是定点医院的现状，没有任何人管。
So they can't get out. Another type of video circulating on social media in hospitals and dead bodies being taken away. The underlying question is, might be much higher than we know.
已经在这里躺了一个上午了，有的人已经是凌晨死的，到现在没有人来处理。
先生经理啊。先生经理，这么高的，这么高啊！
这就是定点医院的现状，没有任何人管。
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and leave a link to this video below as well. Here's the bottom line. Yes, some governments are far less authoritarian than China is normally, right? However, they are less authoritarian until they're not. Meaning, as soon as they believe their power is going to be lost as a result of a spreading pathogen, they will do the very same crackdowns as the Chinese are doing now, but it will be called something completely different. It will be somehow acceptable because it's the American government doing it. The truth of the matter is, our government is our biggest enemy. Our government tests pathogens on us. Our government allows vaccine companies to put all types of poisons in the vaccines. Our government will put you in prison for a very long time over substances they deem illegal, while committing mass murder on the population. Remember, we have the world's biggest prison population. Remember, we have police in this country that routinely rape, steal, murder, extort, among other crimes. Child porn. You remember that. And then ask yourself, if they behave like this now, how are they going to behave when this pandemic takes a major foothold in our nation? Until next time, kill the state with free.